Jason Robbins is one of the co-founders and CEO of DraftKings, the daily fantasy sports site. He's a self-certified sports nut and a graduate of Duke. DraftKings has grown phenomenally, and we look forward to hearing his insights on growth. When you first started DraftKings, Jason, did you ever dream that the company logo would be on the cover of Sports Illustrated?
I think I always hoped it would be big. I don't know that I ever dreamed that would happen, but for me, I always had like a very kind of nebulous view of what big meant. I was never like the daydreamer on the specifics type, like, oh, I wonder what it'd be like to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated or ring the NASDAQ bell or anything like that. It was more just, I wonder what it would feel like to build something huge. I wonder what it would feel like to have a big brand that everyone knew, and that was kind of more the way I thought about it.
So I know you have a background in data and analytics. What do you study when you're considering a new market to enter, such as your leap into NASCAR?
We look at a few things. So NASCAR is a really interesting one for us, and I think is going to be a tremendously successful product. And the things that we looked at were one, how big is the existing fan base? Is the audience big? If it's not a big audience, then I don't know that, no matter how good the product is, it's really going to ever work. The second thing we looked at was, do we think a good product could be constructed in this type of a sport? NASCAR is not one of the big fantasy sports, so it's, there were some season-long NASCAR games, but it's not like there was this template like fantasy football with, tens of millions of people playing that you kind of already have proof of concept that, the product, even though daily is a little different, should look something like this. So we said, what should the product look like? And is that going to be a good product? Is it going to be compelling? Because even if you can attract people onto the platform, if it doesn't retain, if it's not a good experience, it won't retain. If it doesn't retain, then who cares if you can attract people on the platform? And the third thing that we looked at is this going to be another customer acquisition avenue for us? Specifically, are the players that are into NASCAR very passionate and loyal about NASCAR? Are they going to have an affinity for that sport and maybe be easier to acquire on that sport than trying to acquire them on baseball or football or basketball? And how much overlap is there with the other sports is an important part of it, but it was really much more about, is this a strong affinity sport where if you have what they love, they're going to be much more likely to convert on your product?
Is there a way to measure passion?
You can, actually. You can look at engagement metrics amongst fans. So on the broadcast side are the people who are into it, and on the spectator side, how often are they attending events? How often are they watching the broadcasts on TV? On the digital side, how often are they consuming digital content? On the social media side, there's lots of things you can look at to understand how engaged a certain type of fan base is. Another interesting one is soccer. Soccer has an unbelievable, it's very small. It's much smaller than NASCAR and most of the others, but it has a very passionate and loyal, engaged fan base. And even though soccer is a small sport for us, one of the reasons we prioritized launching it was because we saw that people who are into soccer are really into soccer, and they're highly engaged about the sport.
Are there other metrics that you look at that might surprise us?
For something like what sport to launch, or just in general?
Just in general.
Probably a bunch. We look at engagement, though, as the most important thing on everything we do. And engagement can be measured in different forms. Certainly how much money people are spending is the easiest and obvious one. But we also look at how much time people are spending on various portions of the site, look at how often they're playing. And I think it may not surprise you that those individual metrics we look at, but I think the fact that that's the most important thing that we look at, and that's the thing that we pay the most attention to, may. I think a lot of companies in our industry, we're a little short-sighted in trying to focus on just pure revenue and focus on pure marketing efficiency, which isn't to say those things aren't important, but that's all they focused on. And I don't think they paid enough attention to how you create a product that really retains and engages people at a deep level.
Is it a challenge to convince the casual fantasy player that he has a fighting chance against the geek who spends his life in the attic?
I do think that's a challenge for some. And I also think that that's a product issue, ultimately. If you can create a product that makes it easy for people to learn and get better at, then that will help solve that problem. And then the other thing that we really started to focus on more now is how do you create better matchups for people? if the fantasy geek like I used to be, and I'm not very good anymore, but I used to spend way more time on this than I care to admit, or the quant player who's building models and stuff like that. You can't let them just have free reign over everything. So we've created things like beginner games and ability to block people from matching up against you, and just other ways that you can challenge your friends and just play against your friends. That's my favorite part of the game, is to be able to just play against people I know, and that's more fun to me than playing against the public. But we'll have to keep evolving this part of the product. It just is important. I think matching is the key, just making sure that you're not going to change the fact that it's a skill game. It is a skill game, and good players are going to win if they're playing against weaker players most of the time. But you can change that people who are really top-notch players don't have to be able to just play all the weaker players or the new players. And if you're more of a casual fan and you just want to play against your friends or other casual players, we need to make it possible for you to do that.
And how do you assess the quality of your customers' experience? Do you have focus groups or the like?
Yeah. So we do a few things. There's the quant and the qualitative, of course, the quantitative and the qualitative. So we look at a ton of data. You can tell just by how people are behaving what the quality of experience is. If they're spending time on pages you want them to spend time on, and then sometimes spending too much time in areas is bad. If they're trying to do something and it's taking them too long to do it, that's not a very easy to use product. So we look at those sorts of things. We do quantitative surveys to our customers to ask for feedback on overall experience, specific product product features and initiatives that we launch. And then we do qualitative. And qualitative can be done via focus groups, but I actually think the most important thing, we do focus groups, but I actually think the most important thing in our world is to be connected to the community, to be connected to the players. So, we have a very open line with customer support, where when people are emailing in about things, we hear about it throughout the organization. We monitor Twitter, we monitor forums, message boards, we monitor Facebook. We look at what everyone's saying on social media everywhere. And we interact with them. We ask questions. We ask them what could be better. We invite them to participate in beta testing and other things. And I think that that's really made people feel like we care about them, and we're interested in hearing what they have to say.
Tell us about your partnership with ESPN. Any interesting stories come out of that?
ESPN is, in my view, the most important landmark deal in this space. It's the crown jewel. ESPN, in addition to having the largest fantasy database, which is obviously season-long fantasy, a pretty important asset for our company, also is synonymous with sports in America in a way that no other brand is. They're the worldwide leader in sports, and for us to be able to take advantage of that huge fantasy customer database, but also align ourselves with that brand is tremendous. As far as interesting stories, probably too many to tell in a short time, but what I will say is that I had the good fortune to get to know all the senior people at ESPN through the process: John Skipper, Marie Donahue, John Kozner, Ed Earhart, Ryan Spoon, all just really, really what you can tell about a company right away is what kind of people they have and what the culture is like. And we're huge believers in culture at DraftKings. We think culture is the most important asset that any company has. And ESPN just has a great culture. They really do. They just have a culture of sports fans, people who love sports and want to create great experiences for their customers.
So how have you grown as a CEO? You've gone from being the CEO of a real startup to now a company by some are reporting it's got a value of approaching $1 billion. How have you had to adapt?
It's interesting because I think that's probably the biggest challenge and it's not just me, it's my co-founders who are all in senior executive roles here as well. My co-founder Matt is our chief revenue officer, my co-founder Paul is our chief operating officer. All of us have had to go in a very short time span, really only a little over 3 years, from literally doing all of the work ourselves. It was just us when we started. I mean, we did everything in the beginning, the coding, the product design, the marketing, everything. Go from that to having a team of now over 200 people that are incredibly talented, and we need to be able to set sort of the culture and the high-level vision and kind of create frameworks and org structures for them to be able to operate within. And that is a big challenge. I think that the way to get there is never the same path for anyone, but for us, it was just about trying to find the best talent first, so that we knew as we made mistakes and grew into our own roles, we would have awesome talent underneath us that could pick up the slack. And I think that's probably been the biggest differentiator between us and our competition. It's not easy to grow into a role, and I'm still learning every day, and I feel like I'm not doing as good a job as I need to be doing at a lot of things I'm doing. But you can make up for a lot of that if you have an incredibly talented set of people working with you.
So last question. I suspect that there are some Isenberg students who are wondering what kind of qualities you're looking for in people that you're hiring.
I think that there's really three things that matter to us. One is just raw intelligence. I think that, we want the smartest people, the brightest people here. The second thing is a true passion for startups and for building something. I think for us, something like this is never going to be a 9-to-5 job. It's never going to be a straight line anywhere. And if you don't have that passion and you don't have that drive to build something, then you're maybe better suited to a corporate job. And then the third thing is a real collaborative nature. I think that, there's a lot of people who are really smart, who maybe have adopted a bit of a cutthroat mentality in their careers, and we just don't want any of that here. People here need to be here for each other. They need to be supporting each other, and they need to be building things together. And if you're all on the same mission and you're all marching down the same path, and you have a lot of smart people around you who are passionate about what you're doing, then you're going to achieve good things, I think.
So, I'm sorry, one other question.
All right.
Pick one. Cameron Indoor Arena or Fenway Park?
Cameron. Sorry. I love Fenway Park, but there's nothing like Cameron.
All right. Jason, thanks so much. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.